Are you prepared to uncover the most disturbing and censored accounts of the Holy Scriptures? Because what you are about to learn goes beyond any limit your mind can imagine. I'm talking about real stories recorded in the Bible, so intense and devastating that few have the courage to speak about them. And here's the challenge. Can you watch this video until the end without pausing? Because with each passing minute, you will discover even deeper layers of how human depravity reached unimaginable levels, and how the consequences of these acts completely transformed the history of God's people. Imagine a city so corrupted that its inhabitants had completely lost the notion of right and wrong, where sexual violence was practiced openly in the streets, and where even visitors sent directly by God were not safe. Sodom was not merely a place of casual sin. It was the epicenter of moral degradation so complete that it became synonymous with divine destruction. The people who lived there had crossed every imaginable line of human decency. Men attacked young people without any remorse. Families were torn apart by violence, and the entire city had turned into a territory where the most basic laws of humanity were despised and ridiculed daily. When two angels arrived in that city at dusk, they were received by Lot, one of the only righteous men still remaining in that cursed place. He knew exactly the danger those streets represented during the night, and for that reason, he insisted vehemently that the visitors not remain in the public square. The urgency in his voice was not exaggerated. It was the voice of someone who deeply knew the evil that dwelled in every corner of that condemned city. But the horror of Sodom did not wait long to manifest itself. While Lot and his visitors were inside his house, trying to find a moment of peace, the true nature of that city emerged from the shadows like a hungry creature. Men of all ages, from vigorous young men to elders who should have been symbols of wisdom, completely surrounded the residence. They pounded on the door with deafening violence, shouting demands that would make any decent person tremble in horror. They wanted the visitors to satisfy their most perverse desires, and they would not accept no as an answer. It was a crowd thirsty for violence and domination, blinded by lust, and completely devoid of any sense of humanity. Lot, desperate, tried to negotiate with that enraged horde. He went out of the house and begged them not to commit such an atrocity. But his words were met with mockery and even more aggression. The situation was completely out of control, and a supernatural intervention was necessary so that Lot would not be destroyed along with those men. The angels temporarily blinded the crowd and pulled Lot back inside the house. But God's judgment had already been decreed. Before the sun rose again, fire and sulfur fell from the sky, consuming Sodom, Gomorrah, and everything that was in them. The destruction was so complete that those cities became an eternal example of what happens when sexual immorality and perversion become the norm of an entire society.
But you might think that Sodom was an isolated case, an exception in biblical history. The truth is far more disturbing. Centuries later, another Israelite city would repeat the same horrors, proving that the human heart, when abandoned to its own desires, can reach depths of evil that defy comprehension. Gibeah, a city that should have been a safe refuge for being part of the inheritance of the tribe of Benjamin, became the stage for one of the most heinous crimes ever recorded in Scripture. A Levite and his concubine arrived in that city at dusk, hoping to find the traditional hospitality among the people of God. But Gibeah had become so deeply corrupted that no one was willing to help them. Only an old man, himself a foreigner in the city, recognized the mortal danger of spending the night in the public square. There was urgency in his voice when he insisted that they enter his house, as if he knew terrible secrets about that community which no longer deserved to be called part of Israel. The night brought with it absolute terror. Men of the city surrounded the house with the same demonic fury that had consumed Sodom. They wanted the Levite. They demanded that he be handed over to satisfy their collective perversions. The old man tried to protect his guest, going so far as to offer his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine to appease that frenzied crowd. But the Levite, in an act of cowardice that still shocks those who read this passage today, pushed his concubine outside the house, handing her over to those violent men. What happened during that endless night was so brutal that words can scarcely describe it. The woman was abused repeatedly by the entire mob, her body broken and her dignity completely destroyed. When the sun finally rose, she managed to drag herself back to the door of the house, her hands stretched out in one last desperate gesture for help, before her life completely slipped away. The cruelty of that crime did not end there. When the Levite found her dead, he made a decision that would shake the entire nation of Israel. He divided her body into 12 parts and sent each piece to one of the tribes, accompanied by a devastating message about the evil that had occurred in Gibeah. The response was a civil war that almost completely wiped out the tribe of Benjamin, leaving only 600 men alive, hidden and terrified in the mountains. But the sexual sins recorded in the Bible are not limited to the violence of maddened crowds. Some of the most disturbing acts happened within families themselves, where blood ties should have meant protection, but instead became traps of destruction. After escaping the annihilation of Sodom, Lot and his 2 daughters found themselves isolated in a cave in the mountains, believing they were the last survivors of a destroyed world. Desperate to preserve the family line and convinced that there was no longer any hope of normal marriage, Lot's daughters devised a plan that violated all natural and divine laws. They made their father drunk until he lost all consciousness and the ability to understand what was happening, and then they lay with him on consecutive nights. From this incestuous union were born Moab and Ben-Ami, who became the ancestors of the Moabites and the Ammonites, 2 peoples who would later turn against Israel as declared enemies, bringing idolatry, war, and spiritual corruption to the people of God for countless generations.
Sexual corruption reached even the holiest places in Israel. Hophni and Phinehas, sons of the high priest Eli, were supposed to be examples of purity and devotion to the Lord. They had direct access to the tabernacle, the place where the presence of God dwelled among his people. But these men turned the sacred sanctuary into a den of exploitation and abuse. Not satisfied with stealing the best portions of the sacrifices that belonged to God, they used their positions of power to seduce and force the women who served voluntarily at the entrance of the tabernacle. These devoted women, who came to seek God with sincere hearts, were treated as objects of pleasure by those who should have been their spiritual protectors. The scandal was so open and shameless that all Israel knew of the depravity of those priests, and the people's faith was being destroyed before the eyes of religious hypocrisy. Eli knew everything. He constantly heard the complaints, but his rebuke was weak and his actions non-existent. He chose to protect his sons instead of honoring God, and that omission brought divine judgment upon his entire household. Hophni and Phinehas died together in battle. The Ark of the Covenant was captured by the enemies, and when Eli received the news, he fell dead instantly, ending a priestly lineage stained by immorality and cowardice. The entire nation of Israel experienced the devastating consequences of sexual sin while camped on the plains of Moab, on the eve of entering the Promised Land. After decades of wandering in the desert, witnessing daily miracles and being supernaturally sustained by God, the people fell into humanity's oldest trap: seduction through lust combined with idolatry. Moabite women were strategically sent to infiltrate the Israelite camp, using their beauty and seduction to draw the men into feasts that seemed harmless at first. But these celebrations were actually rituals dedicated to Baal Peor, where sexual immorality was not only tolerated but required as a form of worship. The men of Israel, blinded by desire and intoxicated with wine, gave themselves completely to those abominable practices. It was not merely marital betrayal. It was betrayal of the sacred covenant with the God who had freed them from slavery in Egypt. The sin spread like a plague through the camp, and God ordered that the leaders involved be executed publicly. A deadly plague began to devastate the people, and only when Phinehas, grandson of Aaron, took a spear and executed an Israelite man who had shamelessly brought a Midianite woman into his tent before everyone, was divine wrath appeased. But the price had already been paid. 24,000 people died because of that collective sin. Within the very family of King David, the man after God's own heart, sexual sin produced one of the most painful tragedies recorded in Scripture. Amnon, the firstborn and heir to the throne, developed a sick obsession with his half-sister Tamar. It was not genuine love. It was pure lust that consumed his thoughts day and night until he literally became sick with desire. Following the wicked advice of his cousin Jonadab, Amnon pretended to be gravely ill and asked Tamar to come and prepare food for him in his private chambers. When they were alone, he seized her violently. Tamar pleaded, appealed to reason, warned of the shame it would bring to both of them, but Amnon was completely dominated by lust and brutally violated her. Yet what happened afterward was even crueler. Immediately after his act, Amnon was seized with intense hatred toward Tamar, stronger than the desire he had felt moments before. He threw her out of his chambers as if she were trash, leaving her completely destroyed emotionally and socially. Tamar tore her garments, placed ashes on her head, and went to live as a desolate woman in the house of her brother Absalom. When David heard what had happened, he was furious, but took no action against Amnon, perhaps paralyzed by guilt over his own past sins. Absalom, however, never forgot. 2 years later, during a sheep-shearing feast, he ordered his servants to kill Amnon, beginning a chain of events that would culminate in civil war and almost destroy the kingdom of Israel. The sexual sin of one man not only destroyed the life of an innocent woman, but irreparably fractured a royal family and brought political chaos upon an entire nation. These stories are not mere ancient tales with no relevance for our time. They are eternal warnings about how unrestrained lust, sexual immorality, and the abuse of power destroy individuals, families, communities, and entire nations. Each one of these stories shows that the consequences of sexual sin go far beyond the act itself, creating waves of destruction that affect future generations. Sodom and Gomorrah were completely annihilated. Gibeah provoked a devastating civil war. Lot's incest produced enemy nations that tormented Israel for centuries. The sons of Eli destroyed the faith of an entire generation. The sin with the Moabite women killed 24,000 people in a plague. And Amnon's crime against Tamar unleashed a chain of vengeance and rebellion that almost ended the Davidic dynasty before it was fully established. Have you managed to make it this far? Congratulations for having the courage to face these disturbing truths that many prefer to ignore. Now, I want to know your opinion. Which of these stories impacted you the most deeply? Leave your comment below sharing your thoughts about these biblical accounts. If this video opened your eyes to aspects of Scripture you would never considered before, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss the next content we will bring. And if you truly want to make a difference, share this video with people who need to know these truths. Many Christians go their whole lives without knowing these stories because few have the courage to teach them. Be the one who spreads this knowledge.